Hey everybody, what's up? It's your boy Eugene again, and this is Talk to Me with Eugene Williams Jr. And I always have some great guests, and today is no exception. We first met, this young man and myself. We first met in the early '80s.
Yeah,
I think it was in the eighth grade.
The eighth grade, yes, that's right.
Eighth grade at Ransom Everglades School in Coconut Grove, Florida. And we have known each other ever since. And I want to say one thing before I get into the introduction about this man. You know, you go to school with people and you have certain memories of them. And all the years I went to school with this guy, I never once saw him frown. I never once saw him angry. I never once saw him ticked off. I always saw him smiling. I always saw him positive. I always saw him look on the bright side of things when sometimes there wasn't no bright side to look at. And so to this day, I still have an image of him. Let me tell you about him. This guy's been helping students prepare for college for more than 2 decades, maybe close to 3 by now. Okay, he and his wife have founded a company called Your College Concierge. They are advocates for parents, folks who are trying to prepare their kids for college, whether it be standardized tests, whether it be going to different programs, what have you. They do this. If you're a parent who's in the process of dealing with a young person that's going off to college and leaving the nest, you want to talk to this man. This is an advocate for you. This is an expert for you. Okay? I want to introduce you to one of my favorite people, president and co-founder of Your College Concierge, Peter Ratzan.
Thank you, Eugene. That is one introduction, boy. I tell you, thank you so much. I'm happy to see you again. I'm happy to chat with you about life and whatever. That really, what you said there really, really touches me. You don't always know, you meet people through your life and you go to school with them and then, you move on. You try to do your best to leave an impression. You don't really always know because, some of the things, what you just said, you never said that to me, right? So you don't always know what kind of impression you leave with people. So thank you very much. That's really sweet. Really nice.
Well, it's the truth. And so, and now at this stage in our lives, Pete, we get to think about things and reflecting, and we realize that while we're still here, I know we talked about this earlier, we're still young guys in the grand scheme of things.
In our heads.
But things happen very quickly in this new world that we're living. And so while you have a chance to give folks their flowers, while you still can see them, talk to them, touch them, whatever, you kind of need to do that. So that's what I wanted to do for all of my friends, you especially. All right, so let's talk about this company, Your College Concierge. I gave a very brief rundown of what it does. I know I was very general because I want you to get into it. So it's a company, from what I understand, that works with parents and works with prospective college students to prepare them for smooth entry into college. So I remember you from high school. I want to know, what were your earliest inspirations after leaving school that made you decide, this is the career I want for me, and this is the career I want for my wife and my family?
It really didn't work out that way. It's not like I came out of high school thinking this is what I wanted to do. Or came out of college thinking this is what I wanted to do. The way it sort of developed for me, I did know that I was drawn to education. I was drawn to working with young folks and helping to educate them and to shape them. My first gig out of college was in education. I actually went back to our alma mater at Ransom Everglades School, and I taught there for a few years. I taught U.S. history. I taught social studies. I taught world history. Some of my earliest inspirations were the very same teachers who taught us, Mr. Stokes, Mr. Peach, people who were great teachers and who brought history to life. Another one of my earliest inspirations back at Ransom Everglades was a guy named Tony Laterza, who was our basketball coach. This guy was old school. Coach Laterza, he was old school. He taught us a whole heck of a lot. He was in the old school form. He was a mean SOB, but he was also the kind of guy that you loved and you wanted to work really hard for. And he had these great simple maxims, these simple phrases. By keeping things simple, simplicity plus perfection equals success. If you have a good attitude and you follow directions, you're going to get better. Basic little things like that. So my educators were my earliest inspirations, and I decided I wanted to teach. And I was really in love with the idea of history. I've always been a history buff. I've always been kind of a nerd when it comes to that. So that's what I went back to, taught for a few years, realized, I really want to move on. I don't want to stay in high school my whole life. So I was at my own high school and I figured it was time to leave. So I went away to grad school, got myself involved in a totally different career, different direction, worked in telecom for 12 years. And during that, then I had a great run. It was fun. I was traveling all over the world. I was seeing all kinds of new technology, looking at the cutting edge, doing those sorts of things. But that time I had a small family or a young family, and I had, young kids, and I was traveling all over the world. And I didn't really want to do that much anymore. And I didn't want to move to out of town. I didn't want to move to Chicago where my company was located. I didn't want to, Motorola. I didn't really want to leave and work the corporate life my whole life. So I was looking for something new, something different. And I came across this opportunity to get back into education. And one thing led to another. I started this business back in 2007, helping students, helping families, primarily with the process of applying to college, but also getting financial aid and figuring out how to pay for college. Because even back then, in 2007, college, the total cost of attendance in those days was around $56,000, $58,000 a year, which was a lot of money back then. It's a lot of money today. But today, the same cost of attendance is now $97,000, $98,000 a year for 1 year of college at some of the elite private universities out there. So we were looking at a way to help make that more affordable, and at the same time, helping students perfect their application, or at least put together the best college application they could possibly produce, writing their essays, selecting the right set of colleges that give them the best opportunities for success, both with admissions, with aid, with scholarship, and then ultimately with their education so that they were in the right place to succeed.
That's a beautiful idea because, when we went to school, we had the blessing of having guidance counselors who were able to kind of point us in the right direction. And we knew because of the type of curriculum the school offered, all of us were probably headed towards some sort of 4-year institution. We knew that. That was just one of the things that was a requirement. You went to Ransom, you went to college. That's what you did. But for a lot of people nowadays, it's not quite that easy. And sometimes you need more than just your guidance counselor. You need some other supplements. You need some other enhancements in this journey. And so I'm so glad that you are providing that. So as we move on, I want to ask you, you've chosen this career. You've chosen this life. You've built this company as a quote unquote college concierge. Give me one or two of your most memorable experiences in terms of getting parents and students across that finish line.
I was thinking about that, and I figured you were going to ask me a question like this. And in looking back at, now 18 years of doing this, and even before then, a few years that I was teaching and working with students, it's actually hard to come up with one grand memorable experience. But what I will say is this, the work that I do is a lot, on the one hand, it's a lot of little experiences. It's working with individuals. It's helping each individual young person, young man, young woman, find his or her voice, right? And the ability to do that and to help them really discover what it is that they want to say for themselves and how they want to express themselves on their application and the stories that they wish to tell for themselves. Very important. I guess maybe I will say this, maybe this sums it up, right? So in the last year, just in this last year, I was working with a boy who I've actually known since he's 13 years old. I happened to meet him along the way with his family. They were family friends. So I met this kid at 13. By the time he was 16 or 16, they started working with me. So I had known this kid, watched him grow up. And so he kind of saw me as sort of a friend first before I was his mentor, before I was his counselor. So I had to adjust that relationship a little bit and sort of set him straight. But then eventually when it came time to writing his essay, he comes into my office and he writes this essay, and it was okay. I tried to explain to him, you need to tell a story, but he didn't really go about it the right way. And it was not very entertaining at all. It wasn't really where he needed to be. So I said, look, his name's Max. I said, look, Max, you're going to have to rewrite this, right? This is okay. It might be good enough for, your safety school, but it's not going to be good enough for the top schools that you're thinking about. And this kid was looking at, some top schools around the country and competitive selective admissions. So he leaves. He comes back about a week later. He says, how about this? And I read it and it was mildly better. It was improved. I said, it's not good enough. You're going to have to do better than that, right? And you could do better. So he comes back and he finally comes back to me after 3 weeks or a little over a month. And he finally produced it. And just, it's that thrill of watching a kid grow, develop, and discover for himself or herself their voice and their ability to express themselves in a way that's going to be entertaining to that reader. Because here's the thing, this is the rub when it comes to college admissions, right? You're a student and you're busting your butt for 3.5 years of high school. You're taking classes, you're challenging yourself with honors and AP classes. You're doing extracurriculars, you're playing sports, you're joining clubs, you're in the theater, you're in the engineering club, you're doing rocket science, you're doing robotics, all this stuff. You're doing SAT prep, all these things, right? You're working your tail off for 3.5 years. And that admissions person is going to evaluate your application in 15 minutes. So that's an imbalance to the scale in a major way. 3.5 years, 15 minutes. So what I try to tell students is, how are we going to maximize those 15 minutes? What are we going to do so that your 15 minutes, that admissions reader is going to be captured, gripped. You're going to have their attention.
Well, once again, I just think it's so beautiful what you're doing and so important what you're doing. And the whole part of that story where you talked about it wasn't good enough. We got to get better. We got to develop it more. As a former high school principal, I can tell you, as a former English teacher, I can tell you, one of the biggest things we have to instill in our students, not enough. You always can go bigger. You always can go stronger. You can always do more develop with your thoughts. They can do that. They can master those things they need to master. All right, so now we talked about the company, the building, the great experiences. You're an entrepreneur. You're a dad. You're a husband. Give me a positive about your journey, and give me a possible drawback about your journey. What's been the most amazing thing? What's been the thing that you said to yourself, I might have done that differently?
So some of the great things about working for yourself and being in your own business and is really control over your time, right? So I have much more control over my schedule, my time. Now, it's not like I could just take off for 3 months at a time and not work, right? I have to work in order to, be the dad, be the father, be the provider, right? So I do have to do that. But it's having that control over time and being able to set my schedule in a way that, for example, when I started this, my kids were, about 7, 8 years old, and my daughter was in her early teens. I was able to take the time to coach my son baseball, right? I was able to do that. I was able to set my schedule so that certain afternoons I could be there and I could do those things. And I didn't have to pay, I didn't have to travel at the whim of my manager. I didn't have to fly across the world, whether it was to, West Coast or to Asia or Europe or wherever it was, to South America. I could control where I was going to be. And that was a big thing, right? So I think that's the most important. One of the great benefits of being an entrepreneur or having your own business is being able to control your schedule and your time. Obviously I don't have that regular paycheck in the sense that, somebody's paying me to do my work, and, that's the trade-off, right? So, I am working for myself. So I do need to, what I earn is indeed what I earn. And it's every day I'm out there, helping families and working one student at a time, one family at a time. So, I would say that, some of those challenges come with that, right? I took a risk when I started this, right? And my safety net was, I had my 401k, and I had, I put that out there, and I took my chance and I went with it. And I had the support of, the people around me, my family, and we made it work. And fortunately for us, we were able to get started with it pretty quickly right away, and we're able to make this thing go.
I'm hearing you and talk about the journey, talk about the starting as a teacher, then going into sales, and going into your own company, your own business, become an entrepreneur. And like you said, a lot of people think being an entrepreneur is just, I'm just going to go into business for myself. Well, in many ways, entrepreneurs work harder than folks who work for other people, because your check is totally based upon what you do that day, that month, that year. So great respect for that. How has your career, though, shaped? This is an interesting question. I want to hear what you think about it. How has your career shaped the type of man you feel you've become as a dad, as a husband, as a friend? How has your outlook on life been shaped by the career you've chosen?
I would say, first of all, just by being around young people and encouraging young people and trying to inspire young people, it does keep me young. So I think that's one area perhaps where my career has shaped me. I think in some ways, though, I have shaped my career in that way, right? So education has always been my my go-to. It's sort of my original DNA, and just by people ask me what I do and what industry I'm in, and I'm real proud to say that I'm in education, right? And then they wonder like what that means, right? Am I a teacher? Well, no, I did that, but I have my own business, my own practice, and being able to say that I do that, it does give me a sense of pride. I think that how my career has shaped me, like I said, it's kept me young. It's kept me around young folks. I do think that what's important is, really to just whatever career people take, whatever industry people, whatever path people choose to go into, is to try to become an expert in that particular industry, right? So I ask people, young kids all the time, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be when you grow up? And what's your goal? And they give me a profession, they give me a job that they want to do. And let's say, for example, an accountant, or they want to go into finance, or they want to go into, IT or whatever it might be. That's all great. That's your job. That's your task. But at the same time, and somebody gave me this great advice a long time ago, and that is, focus on an industry and become an expert in that industry, whatever that might be. Today, if it's AI, or if it's automotive is the industry, or if it's space travel is the industry, or if it's computer technology, or if it's sports management, whatever the industry is, become an expert in that specific industry, and then you could take your skill set and and work your way through that and bounce around. You could go from company to company and work your way up through that industry, become an expert, and captivate audiences and really use that expertise to be able to grow and thrive.
So here's the thing, parents. You're watching this podcast. You see this man is in charge of a company called Your College Concierge. So I want you to be thinking about how to contact him. So if someone wants to reach out to you or your company to get your services, Peter, what do they need to do?
Well, we have a website, right? Your College Concierge. That's really a great place to go. We have a blog, College Pete. collegepete.com is a great resource. We produce content. What we like to do is, when we produce content, we're writing about what's happening in the world of education, in the world of higher education. There are a lot of changes going on always in the world of higher education. Just in the last several years, we've seen some major changes, both before COVID, certainly through COVID, and after, right? Where, college attendance has changed. The requirements to get in, the test optional movement has evolved. Affirmative action disappeared a few years ago at the Supreme Court. So that's changed college admissions. Right now we're seeing on campuses, elimination of programs like DEI and the influence of, in various states, of governors and state houses or state governor mansions interfering with the educational system at the higher level. So, we're seeing a lot of changes there. And as a result, and then certainly in the last year, the demonstrations that occurred on campus the last year and a half, as a result of, the October 7th and, the ensuing war that followed and all of that, that's changed is the dynamic in terms of where people want to attend school and what schools they're looking at. So we write about a lot of that stuff. Okay. I don't really get into the political side of things. I try to avoid that. But, my focus is really more on, given all the noise, right? This is what I try to tell parents. Given all the noise that's going on, what can you control? What can you do, and what can you as a student do what can you control in order to, improve your chances of success? I mean, you have to keep your eyes on the ball, stay in your lane, and look ahead. And, what do you need to do because there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of, misinformation out there. And there's, you can throw up your hands and say, okay, well, then I can't go here. I'm not eligible to be at that school, or, it's not going to work out. But as a student, as a parent, you have to just focus on what you can control. So I would say, go to College Pete, go to yourcollegeconcierge.com. That's our site. That's the best way to reach us. And, we work with students and families all over the place. We started off as a small practice here in South Florida. In some ways, Gene, I never left South Florida, right? So I work with families and down here, but because of technologies like Zoom and, the internet. I mean, I've worked with families across the country, across the world, and that's also very inspiring to be able to work with students from other countries and to inspire them to the opportunities that the United States can offer, and the educational system that we have here. We have the greatest top higher education system in the world. And what's kind of sad right now, unfortunately, is a lot of international students are afraid to come here. They're concerned, to come here on an international visa and what's going to happen to them and whether they're going to be able to stay here. I have some students I'm working with, international students who reside here, who live here, who want to go to school here, but they're also going to be applying to colleges outside the United States because as a safety net, just to be sure. They want to make sure they're going to be able to go somewhere, they're going to be accepted and wanted. They don't want to have their college interrupted midstream.
The thing that's so amazing to me about that is people think that making a decision about college is just about, I pick a place, I like the program, it's where I want to go. But you talked about the socioeconomic component of it, political component of it, all of the things that fall into that decision making. It's a very complicated decision. So one of my biggest questions also is, do you have or have you worked with kids who are first generation college students?
Well, absolutely. A lot of our students are first generation. In fact, one of the things that I've chosen to do, and I was inspired to do this about 15 years ago, was to join up with a local organization called Take Stock in Children of South Florida, of Broward County. And Take Stock in Children is a mentor program where we specifically identify first generation at-risk youth who are, these are kids who are on, Pell Grant eligible families. These kids are getting free and reduced lunch, right, in their school system. And, they're at risk. They're at risk for a variety of different reasons, largely financial, and they get matched up with a mentor. And by meeting with that mentor, say once a week, and continuing to work with that mentor, staying in school, staying out of trouble, maintaining a minimum GPA, they get a scholarship to go to college. And I've been supporting this organization, again, for the past 15 years. I've been on their board as well. So I serve on their corporate council, and those are all first-gen students. And I've been a mentor. I've had 6 mentees, 6 students or so who've come through. And in fact, I just ran into one of my mentees the other day. That was a lot of fun, things like that occur. So I have had the opportunity to volunteer and work with first gen, but we also work with a lot of first gen in our practice. I mean, we get a lot of students coming through whose parents came to the United States from other countries. They want their kids to succeed. They want them to get a great education. They're first gen being educated here in the U.S. Sometimes those parents were educated elsewhere, but they're not familiar with the American system. Right. And so they're seeking guidance. They're seeking advice. So, we get a lot of first gen students, and we get actually a lot of the American kids that we get, the kids whose parents grew up in the United States. I mean, college admissions is a lot different today than it was back in the 80s and 90s when the parents were applying to college. So even for them, they almost feel like they're first gen. Granted, they do have the advantages of going through the process, and they're much, I'm not equating the two. There's definitely a difference between a student who comes from a first gen household whose parents have no clue, no idea what's going on with the college admissions process, and they need that additional guidance. I also had, and finally, one more thing. I had an experience about several years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I guess it's been now, in the DC area, in DMV, where we worked with students from the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington. These were a lot of first gen students who were, wanting to get to college, and they were the whole program was funded by an organization called the ACE Foundation, which is Achieving Career and College Excellence. And these guys provided a whole grant to the Boys and Girls Clubs. A gentleman by the name of Martin Alloy, who was from Stanley Martin Homes, who built a lot of homes in the DMV area. These guys put up a ton of money to support scholarship programs for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington. And I was honored to be the counselor who was supporting that program. So I got to meet with a lot of kids from the Greater Washington area who were first-gen students who were able to get to school. That was a real rewarding experience for me.
Peter, here's the thing that as I listen to you, first of all, I'm so glad to see you. It's been too many years.
Yeah.
As I listen to you, I just am very, very happy, because it's always good to see folks, to whom much is given, much is required. And it's clear that you are a person who believes in giving back to the community We talk about first-gen students. We talk about students from all walks of life, and you're giving them an opportunity to get that leg up. A lot of times they wouldn't have without advocates like yourself and companies that do the things that your company does. I want to thank you for all the great things that you're doing. And folks, please, yourcollegeconcierge.com. If you have a student that's getting ready to go into college, that's where you need to direct them. That's where you need to point them to. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Talk to Me with Eugene Williams Jr. And I have been graced with an old friend, Peter Ratzan, founder and president of yourcollegeconcierge.com. We love you. Be blessed and have a great one. Bye-bye now.